Megan Compain, welcome to Between Two Beers.
Kia ora. Nice to see you, Steve. Seamus, good to be here.
Oh, very excited to have you in the Export Beer Garden studio this afternoon. Are you allowed to be here? It's a bit like an away game, eh?
It is. Oh, yeah. We're drinking homemade brew from old mate's garage. So
you are. I'm drinking Export. Yeah, you're on the nondescript home brew.
I'm on the nondescript. But I am allowed to be here. I've asked for permission.
Yeah, nice that got signed off.
A few Sunday emails, but that's all right.
Yeah, excited to get into it. So in the space of 7 days last week, you were recommended it to us by two former guests, Ric Salizzo and Zealand Armstrong. Were you in their ear? Were you telling them to say something? It wasn't that order.
Yeah, it wasn't that order.
Yeah, what's the relationship with those two?
Wow. So, I'll start with Zeon, my cousin, and he is. I can't wait for his ep to come out because we've often talked about. God, you should be you could write a book about your life and a movie, and then who would play in the movie, and you kind of get down this rabbit hole. He's incredibly impressive, but you probably wouldn't know his name.
Yeah.
You start talking to him and, the things that he's done, where he's come from. And
he left a few names on the ground that he dropped out of his pockets before. So
the thing with Z is, we talked about a little bit earlier, typical whānau stuff. Love you, cuz, but, he might have won at the game of life. He's got a few more zeros in his bank account, but doesn't have two Olympics.
Nice.
And if he comes down to it, I'm still Nana's favourite. When she had the pyramid of portraits on the wall, I was always at the top.
There you go. That's what's most important.
Yeah, it's most important.
So that episode, by the time this comes out, that one will be out, so people will know the Z story
and the Z on Armstrong name.
What a family. And what about Ric? What's the connection there?
Oh, wow. Ric and I go way, way back. A good friend of mine, actually a former Tall Fern as well, Sally Farmer, worked with Ric on Sports Cafe back in the day.
Yep.
And so I think we used to go along and just sort of hang out post Sydney Olympics. And so I knew of Ric Salizzo and obviously knew of Sports Cafe. And I thought I'd kind of fancy myself as a guest, but never asked me.
So you never got on?
Never, ever. Has he done a story on me?
Ouch.
Yeah, Ric Salizzo, calling you out now.
Yeah.
But when I started working at New Zealand Rugby, he was working for Left Field Productions, thank you. And they were doing a lot of stuff with telecom, aka Spark for you young people. And they were doing a lot of production work around a contract with the All Blacks, and we got to work with some of his video people and producers and things like that.
James Somerset doing that stuff.
Mr. Summers.
What a throwback name that is. I wonder where that guy is these days.
I've seen him a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, right.
He's fantastic. One of my favourite people in the world. He is working for Team New Zealand. So he's been in Barcelona, as James would say. Fantastic guy. And he ended up working with the All Blacks with another guy called Dan Frost for about 10 years. And the three of us sort of travelled the world as the additional travellers around the All Blacks.
We should have mined Somerset for some information. That would have been genius.
Yeah. Well, you come highly recommended. And there's another guy we spoke to in the build-up to this, Steve Chu, who had some words to say about you. So Steve is the former CEO of New Zealand Rugby, and he was your boss for 10 years. He told us you were quite similar to Raylene Castle, who's a former guest, in your work hard, play hard style. He said she will work every hour of the day, but will also enjoy life when opportunity hits. Is that fair? Is that your style?
Well, as we were touching on, there's a lot that you talk about post off the camera, right? But yeah, that's far out. That's a pretty big compliment to be paid by a guy like Steve Chu, who I absolutely admire and have a huge amount of respect for, about someone who I absolutely admire and have a huge amount of respect for in Raylene Castle. So, but we talked about, what you used to do 10 years ago, and what you can actually afford to do now at my age, very different. Yeah. So I think the work hard part, yep. Play hard. I'm in bed at 7, mate, on the road.
Yeah. When was the last time you had a day beer?
A day nondescript beer? A very long time ago. To your point, I just can't.
Yeah.
But I do look at young people who look at me now and probably think I'm a bit old and, boring. Like, if only you knew. If only social media was around.
I don't know, because I've got a line that you were out partying after the Women's Rugby World Cup final till all hours, then backed it up the next day with a boss performance emceeing a women's sporting conference. Truth?
There might have been a couple of days gap in between there, but celebrating the Black Ferns win, that was epic.
Yeah.
How good.
Okay.
And then, the first time I met Sarai Bareman, actually, at the FIFA draw, and did a panel discussion with her, and was on a bit of a roll. And I remember at one point she looked over and she was like, is anyone going to offer her a job? This is pre me heading back into the New Zealand Rugby fold. So
yeah, nice.
Yeah, it's a good place to pick up on. So we asked Steve for some more words, and we said, well, what's Megan really like? And he said, she was a very high-performing athlete, and to be successful as an athlete at a high level gives you good attributes for the rest of your life. She's a team player, full of commitment, enters the pain cave on a regular basis, loyal, a very good human being with great values, very competitive, and she likes to win. Like most well-balanced high performers, she's very unhappy when she loses, and she's brought those traits to a lot of roles at New Zealand Rugby. She bridged the gap between the commercial team and the All Blacks environment. The coaches are always fearfully protective of sponsors encroaching on their team or taking focus away, and Megan had to manage that and did it very well. So that was in your former role, but now you took a little break and now you're back. So what is it? What's your role now, and what's it like being back in the rugby scene?
Yeah, it's really good question. Probably the way that Steve's described my previous role, sitting in the organisation, in the union, if you will, working it back into the team. So everything over here, all the off-field requirements that need to get done to maintain this commercial architecture that feeds the game from grassroots all the way through to our professional teams in black, was me on the other side dipping in. The creation of this role is effectively being now in the team. My responsibility is ultimately to Scott Robertson to manage all of the off-field requirements so that it doesn't, number one, doesn't impact performance, but number two, we should be looking at it as trying to enhance. At a crude level, the investment that goes into the game is predominantly done by off-field investors, so sponsors, commercial partners, broadcasters, fans, in respect of them buying tickets, watching games on TV, etc. And there's a responsibility from a team perspective that there's an understanding of the professional environment, that you go to training. So you show up for Nick Gill, you're in the gym and you're working hard. You show up on the match day, you're going to work hard for Scott Robertson and the coaches. There's an element of needing to, understand that is as important to make sure we're winning off field as well. So that's when we're talking to the media, when we're doing content plays that are going to feed this sort of content beast that connects with our fans, and when we're working with our commercial partners, so that all maintained in an environment of performance. Our players understand why they're being asked to do these things, and they show up and do them really, really well. And for the most part that happens, but the opportunity to relook at the way the role was structured under the previous regime, who had 20, some of them were 20 years in the role, which is a massive stint. And I worked with all of those guys, the Gilbert Anokas, the Darren Shans, was to look at that opportunity when the off-field requirements have grown so much in the last 10 years and the expectations are so much greater, to have a sole focus on that. So it actually does stay out of the way performance. So you've got now Darren Shan's role basically split in two. I think everyone knows Shandy. Split in two with an operational manager who is concentrated on the team moving from A to B, focused on the getting them onto the pitch on Saturday, and me focused on everything else that falls outside of that off-field. So media, content, commercial partnerships, fan engagement, how we show up and how we want to be seen. It's an exciting place to be in this new era.
Really exciting, huge job. I'm really excited to unpack and get into the nitty-gritty of it a little bit later. But we sort of wanted to paint a picture of how you got there. And when Zeon was in, he was suggesting your CV was better than his. And he's got a pretty impressive CV.
He would never say that to me, though.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, never to your face. So I've actually written down, I'm going to whiz through it. and I couldn't fit everything in here, so I've skimmed a few off.
Yeah, you dropped a few big ones in there, in my opinion, as well.
Okay, ready? First New Zealander to play professional basketball in the United States. First New Zealander and still only Kiwi woman to play in the WNBA. Professional basketball player in Germany, Finland and Wales. Represented the Tall Ferns for 10 years. Double Olympian, Basketball New Zealand Hall of Famer. Worked globally for Adidas and New Zealand Rugby. Travelled with the All Blacks for 3 World Cups. Elected board member for Basketball New Zealand. Sky Sport commentator. All Blacks manager. And to close the list, and what I've heard you say is your greatest achievement, wife to Carlos and mum to Emil. And so the question, so those listening will be like, well, okay, fucking hell, that's a list.
But left off sport team owner and a whole bunch of other stuff as well.
Top of Queens, come on, back up.
Yeah, left a few off. But the question at the end of that is, you've achieved so much at this stage of life, but what stage of life are you at now? Like, what will that CV look like in 10 years? Like, where are you at?
Wow. I mean, you choose that much because I'm old. We could start there. When you list it out like that, it's a little bit crazy, because I still have the same anxieties and self-doubt now that I did when I was in my 20s and my teens and things like that. And I think that's a product of maybe our generation of women. But I think there's maybe a bit of personal stuff that goes into that as well. I've never been self-assured. I've never been self-confident. I've probably just got better at hiding it. If you ask me, what does the next 10 years look like? I want to be the best version of myself for my kid. And it was kind of the reason why I went back to rugby. And, I think let's park the fact that it's an incredible place to work and I'm very privileged and all that sort of stuff. But I looked at my life up until that point and felt like there was a massive gap. And I was the staunchest, not for me. Kids aren't my thing. And, I was firmly in the no kids camp. And I even when I got pregnant and I was breaking it to one of my greatest friends in the world, Sally Farmer, that I was pregnant, I felt guilty.
Oh, really?
But it was something that was a real privilege at 43 to have Emil. And I looked at this opportunity in front of me and was like, well, that is something that I want to do so my kid can be really proud of me. And I can feel like I'm contributing to a wider, bigger cause. And I can, I'm around people who are looking after themselves, they're fit, they're mentally fit, they're, high performing. And I felt like I was like coming full circle in a way. It's an interesting one. What 10 years looks like from here on in, hopefully retired with a house on Waiheke.
You go. Big 10.
But I'm taking it 4 years at a time, which is an obvious sort of, cycle of a World Cup campaign, and God willing, I'll be with Razor for those 4 years, and I'll prove myself to the team, and I'll prove myself to the wider management team that this was the right thing to do, to split the roles, and I'll do a really good job of getting out of the way and help them win a World Cup. That would be the ultimate goal. So yeah, it's an interesting one, sort of coming around circle.
Just after Stephen's listed off all those achievements as well, what does a day in the life for you actually look like? Because you've got so many strings to your bow that I've got to imagine you've got to keep all those balls kind of juggling in the air. 2 analogies in one question.
Big analogy guy.
Wow, I like that. A day, I think a typical day today is going to look very different from a typical day in July, August, September, October, November, when the team are assembled. I'm in a little bit of a information gathering time at the moment in terms of rugby. So I'm not operationally focused. So I need to go back to the union and talk to the head of marketing, the head of commercial, head of events and fan engagement, and head of media and comms, and try to understand what are our opportunities, what's our strategy to connect where we need to connect with the team this year, and bring that all back to the coaches to effectively Razor and say, this is what we need to achieve, and this is how I propose we achieve it within a performance structure.
But pausing on work,
performance window, everything else.
Yeah, like that. The work part of it goes without saying, but like it's all the other things. Like to Steve's point, Steve Chu's point, there's only so many hours in a day.
Yeah. Well, it's a really interesting one, and I'll be careful what I say here because I am deeply appreciative of the game of rugby in New Zealand, but I'm passionate about basketball, if I'm being real and truthful and honest. And so the last 4 years of being able to be involved in basketball from a governance level has been amazing because it's gotten me back connected. The Tall Ferns just, had a heartbreaker over in China and woke up to the news that they'd just lost by 2 to Puerto Rico, which would have been their ticket to Paris. And the genuine hurt inside me, I was so reflecting on it and went, I actually love caring again about this sport that gave me so much because I was so disconnected to it for such a long time. And I think there's an understanding and appreciation, particularly on the governance board for basketball through the team management of Tokomano Queens, that I will give everything I can when I can. So there's an element of I know that I don't get pulled into a lot of subcommittees on the basketball board, but when I show up, I'll do my best and be present and show up. There's a FIBA connection to what I'm doing as well, which I'm really excited about. And I was elected or appointed onto the FIBA Oceania board, which again is a sense of, I was floored at the FIBA Congress and being appointed on to represent New Zealand as part of Oceania and looking at all these Pacific islands and some that I hadn't even heard of, didn't even name, and the difference between when you're working in a sport like basketball in Australia and New Zealand, it's all about pinnacle events. And in the Pacific, and you guys would understand this working for Oceania, football is about life, is about opportunity, is about well-being, and for kids to just get out of what they're going through and bounce a ball and feel good about themselves or have connection or, have a better way to, have a healthy lifestyle. So it's at two extremes. And that's what is really fascinating about that position. So how do I fit it all in? I try to wake up early, just getting harder and harder. I used to be at the gym. Oh God, I could go off on a tangent of being a 48-year-old mum of a 4-year-old. I try to get up early and go to bed early. And that is very different to the life that Steve Chu was just talking about previously, because I didn't have a child. So it does change everything, right? It was like, I can get so much done between 5:30 and 7:30, but I need to then be in bed by 9. Yeah.
I want to start taking us back to the start because we've spoken about your accolades and where you've got to, but the odds weren't stacked in your favour to achieve what you have. Like growing up as a half-caste sporty girl in Whanganui in the 90s. Whanganui or Whanganui?
Well,
generational.
I say my brother actually taught me this. Whanganui, the iwi in Whanganui, it was always H. There's always an H in it, but they pronounce it with a soft H. So the iwi in Whanganui say Whanganui.
Whanganui. Not
Whanganui.
Okay.
Which is the harder H from the northern parts of the country.
We'll go Whanganui.
Yeah.
So the upbringing, reflect on your upbringing. I've spoken to a few people that describe it as sort of humble beginnings. Is that fairly accurate?
It's absolutely accurate. And it's probably reflective of the time though, right? You always kind of look back now and go, I met my husband and I sitting at a cafe with Emil. He was 1.5, 2, whatever, and got all this shit that you're bringing with you to put on the table and entertain for the 45 minutes that you can sit there at a cafe. And then I was like, God, what did our parents do when there wasn't iPads or, these colouring in magic pens and this sort of stuff? And I went, oh, that's right, we didn't go to cafes. We didn't go to restaurants.
Yeah.
We went to this Riverina cafe or restaurant for birthdays, and that was it. Kind of very hardworking, blue collar. Dad came over from Fiji in the 60s. Met my mum on a rodeo. He was a bit of a cowboy, bit of a bad boy, and my mum, who you would think she's just an absolute saint. But I was like, there's something to her though, because she fell in love with him.
Yeah.
And that was like the two opposite ends of the scale. Had 3 kids. And when I was 5, he had a really significant accident. And I remember the day, you go, well, what do I remember? I remember up until I remember, if anything that I remember prior to 5, it was pre-Dad's accident, and then there was a bit of a gap. And I think it was just because we blocked everything out. And I think I started remembering things again at like 10. But I remember the day and came home. Mum worked night duty. She was a maternity nurse. And she wasn't home. And my nana was there, my dad's mum. And her mum was there, so my great-grandma. And she sort of just scooped me up and started singing to me in this Fijian song. I was like, where's Mum? Because I'd just always run up the hallway because she was asleep. And like, oh, Dad's had an accident. I remember going to the hospital. He'd been a fitter welder, and a concrete pipe on a crane fell, hit him on the head, cracked his skull. Shouldn't have made it, shouldn't have lived, but ended up 3 weeks in a coma and significant brain trauma. So we've lived with a father who has significant brain injury our whole lives. And he's alive, which we're incredibly thankful for. He's still alive. God knows how. He has tried on multiple occasions to fall over and hit his head and do himself in for good. But he's like a cat with 9 lives. But it was that, I mean, that shaped everything, because we effectively felt like we lost our dad on that day. I was 5. My other brothers were older, up till 10. And you know, I look back at the photos of Dad on rodeos, and he was a boxer, and you know, really athletic, and like none of my sporting achievements or none of my sporting life in school I could share with him, because he wasn't in that space. So he became, you know, almost like another fourth child for Mum. So it was easy when people say, you know, Mum let me go at 16, or I wanted to go when I was literally a week after my 16th birthday. It was easy to leave home, and I know I feel like if I say that, it's going to be absolutely heartbreaking for my mum to hear that. But it was easy to leave home because it was so hard, you know. Mum struggled. She had to only work 2 days a week. Dad was pensioned, you know, off on ACC from the age of 35 until he retired, you know, until retirement age. And we had a really safe existence, I guess, in respect of we had a roof over our head, we had food. Our school holidays were spent between Waitara with family and Huntly with family. I remember the first time I went to Wellington, I was about 14 with a school friend. So it was humble, really, really humble. But I think I just remember, I don't know what was the driver to get out, to do something different. But I knew if I didn't, I was probably going to be one of those girls that ended up, worst case, pregnant in sixth form, best case, doing PE at Otago University. That was my ambition.
Yeah. Well, so was basketball your escape?
Yeah, it was, and but it was more than the sport. It was the lifestyle and the culture. You know, you talk about that. You make connections through sport, and you know, that was like kind of late 80s, early 90s, sort of heyday of the Rhineck League, and my cousins, the Compain boys from Auckland, were playing basketball, and it was all the cool, hip, you know, Mormon kids and PI boys that were playing, and they were all really cute.
Was that the days of like NBA courtside? Or NBA action was on a Sunday afternoon on TV3?
Yeah, and then one game on a Thursday night. Yeah. And that was it.
It was super influential though, because we had 3 channels back then.
Yeah,
and
Whanganui, we had TV3 like 2 years after the rest of the country.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but like, the cast of characters like Dominique Wilkins and Stacey Augman and Larry Johnson and all those, like, they were larger than life.
Massive. I mean, I wore 11 because of Isaiah Thomas, and, you know, Magic was obviously, you know, Magic, and Jordan was actually a little bit later, you know, and I think with Michael Jordan, I've always appreciated him, but I kind of didn't want to love him because everyone else loved him. Just to be a bit different. But it was so influential. We used to go to the Whitcoulls or whatever the bookstores here and just like grab Slam magazines and just flick through.
I didn't even play basketball when I did that.
Couldn't afford to buy them.
Yeah.
You know, but stand there for hours just flicking through, and it was all the culture and stuff. And I remember even just watching things like when Oprah Winfrey got big, and it was just the American culture, and it just had somehow a real big pull. And so when the opportunity came to go, I was only 14 when I got seen at a tournament by the family that ended up, you know, kind of taking me over there. And I was like, yeah, it's like mum goes, you can't go at 14, but you have to wait a year. But it wasn't there was no question. It was just, yeah, I'm gone.
Yeah.
No idea what I was going into.
Because this is pre-internet. Pre-everything.
No, you'll get this. You remember the aerograms?
Yeah, my dad used to write one to his mum in the UK every week.
And then you flipped it over because you could write a little bit more. And that was always mum writing, okay, love you. Okay, see you soon. Bye, love you. Kiss, kiss, kiss.
Yeah.
Aerograms. I think I saved every single one my mum wrote me. Yeah. I know I talk about my mum a lot and I don't talk about dad a lot. He was always there, but it was, that connection piece is, always a bit harder.
It's a hell of a transition to Newark in New Jersey for high school. Like that is, and we're talking like Rodney King era, there's racial tension, like that's just the whole thing is so big.
Well, especially when you get on a plane thinking you're black.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I got on a plane thinking I was African American because my great grandfather is African American, and then we grew up half caste and grew up, being considered people of color, and then you get on a plane. And the funny thing was that first flight from LA to LA to Newark, there was a little kid, and it was turning around and looking at me. And
Says the little kid.
Says the little kid.
That was on the plane as
16-year-old. And I was sort of smiling and giving it this, and the mum kind of looked at me a bit strangely, and I was thinking, oh, I'm in the States now. Do they not want me to, because I'm black? Like looking at it, or I'm brown skinned, Kiwi's brown, looking at this like little white kid, and she probably doesn't want me to, Yeah. So it's just like, you have no idea. Like, but it was what I thought I was, and it was a long time before I figured out, no, you're Puerto Rican at best.
Yeah,
maybe an Italian with a tan, but they couldn't understand brown. They couldn't understand, real mixed race.
And what does that do to a 16-year-old brain?
I don't know. I sat in the cafeteria and I gravitated to the black girls because it was like, that was the culture I wanted to be a part of. And I remember sitting there and they were like, oh, so, what are you? I was like, oh, I'm half black, half white. And they're like laughing, just like taking the absolute piss out of me. And it's just, then I just sort of realized, well, what the hell am I over here? But because they couldn't put you in a box, they really struggled. Black or white, really, really struggled, and especially in that high school kind of environment, to work out what you were. And did you have exchange students at school, in high school?
Yeah.
And they were like the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Well, oh my God, it's Sven from Sweden. Like we want to be friends with Sven. And I thought going over there that I was going to be this amazing novelty.
Nah.
I'm not interested at all.
Because what was your living situation? Were you homestay?
I was living with a New Zealander that was the family of the people that kind of brought me over. I was supposed to then go live with one of the girls from the basketball team, but I ended up staying in that sort of situation. So no other high school student, they had 3 little kids, and I was just showed up at school thinking, like I'm the New Zealander, everyone's going to want to be friends with me.
But were you gun basketballer?
I was a gun basketballer. Well, I didn't know it then. I can say that now. I would never have said that a few years ago. I was, but I had to transition my position because I was a centre, power forward, back to the basket, all the moves, and I get over there and I'm like a short ass. So the first thing they said was that you need to face the basket and get a 3-point shot. So my junior year in high school, I started trying to transition into more of a 2-3 guard, and that was a big shift coming from, and handle the ball. That was a big shift coming from, back to the basket type stuff. But I, that was my social connection and my social currency was the fact that I played basketball.
You could hoop.
I could hoop. And then for whatever reason, the captain of the football team took an interest. So we kind of got cool.
Oh, there you go.
And then the whole world opened up.
Yeah.
I was like the cool kid going to all the parties and
So when we reached out to you about coming on the podcast, we had a bit of back and forth about, what we might want for you, and we talked to some people, and our style isn't to just go through and talk about the greatest hits. Like, we did this and we did this and we did this. And then you sent us an email and said, actually, there's a speech I gave, and it was to a private audience, but you might be interested in some of it because it includes a part of my story and my journey, which I haven't really touched on before and I haven't spoken about, but I feel like maybe the time is right to do it.
Got those tissues?
Yeah. And
We'll get them. We'll get them.
Famous, you promised.
Yeah, you did. We're incredibly grateful that you've found the safety to talk about this here. But I was wondering if, in your words and in any way you want to talk about what happened in your senior year.
Yeah. And I probably should preface with, again, everybody goes through some kind of adversity, and I'm certainly not special, unique, and certainly on a scale of the things that can happen to you, I don't feel like, everyone has their own experience, I guess I should say. The reason probably why I've been really nervous and hesitant to share this is, number one, a platform that I trusted and that I felt like I could be supported on, and for whatever reason it's between two beers, so thank you. And the second reason is, this is probably the part where I'm going to cry, my mum, and I say that because she let me go at 16, and I have to be really careful what I say because she'll feel guilty, and she has nothing to feel guilty about, and I'm definitely the person I am today because of everything that I've gone through, the highs, the lows, and everything. And if it wasn't then, it could have been at any other time. But so coming back to the experience, I was 16 and I was in this environment overseas, and I was particularly with someone I really trusted, and was very much a father figure, and there potentially could be some stuff when you think back about my experience growing up and the loss of my dad and everything but body, and he abused that trust, and it was slight, like little bits at a time. You kind of look back now as a grown, mature person and go, God, all the signs were there that I was getting kind of groomed into this position of isolation, dependency, guilt, and then, manifested itself into a relationship that I wasn't prepared to cope with at 16. And it did all blow up, and it created this, and I'm saying this for the first time, I walked into the sea, and I didn't know if I was going to come out, and I did, and I'm really pleased I did. But that was that sort of stark moment of God sliding doors, right? But it was such a long time after that I was able to look back and go, fuck, I was 16. It wasn't my fault. I should have done this. I should have done that. Oh God, how could I have this? How could I have that? That was me for 10 years. And then I don't know really what point it turned around, but you do grow up and you still do sort of look back and you go, none of that is on me. None of that responsibility I should carry. And I just look at the environment that, and it's, I think about it, why I'm so passionate about raising value and visibility for women in sport, partly because of this and partly because of, then all the achievements and that you read out that got no significant, kind of airtime or recognition or anything during that time. It just fed and added to my sense of inferiority and my sense of, you made the WNBA, but you didn't play much, or you only played one season. It's the WNBA, it's not the NBA. And that just all sort of feeds this sort of sense of, self, hatred and or not good enough or imposter. And, but it's so, I guess, I don't know where my point is there, but it's, I wanted to share that with you because I haven't shared that publicly. And I think about someone, maybe there's a player on my Queen's team or there's a player that's playing internationally in a school, and they can go, shit, I'm not feeling safe at the moment, or I'm feeling like I'm really isolated, or this happened to me and I'm not comfortable with this, or this is happening to me and I'm not comfortable with this, and feeling like they can come forward and speak. I would hate to think that, are there any female athletes out there at a certain, age that have not had an experience that has made them really uncomfortable on a sliding scale? And we talked about that earlier, all the way up into, something that I experienced, which I was, so ashamed of, to then have, 10, 15 years worth of self-hatred and to come out the other side and realise that it wasn't me, to just being on a massage table and feeling unsafe. And it's a real problem. It's a problem in sport that still exists. Can't understand, why is there not more measures in place to keep our athletes safe and our young women safe? And we know sport's a window to society, so whatever's happening in sport's happening in society, and can we actually start to create safer environments? I think the Me Too movement was fantastic to actually raise the awareness, but it shouldn't be on us to bring it forward. When I worked at Adidas, I refused to travel to Serbia on my own, and I had to scout over in Serbia a lot, but I'd travel with a guy called Rob Muirs because I had an experience there where I got cornered in my hotel room at 4 o'clock in the morning by some, big Serbian agent guy. And you're like, I shouldn't have to deal with this. I'm a professional working for a global sports organization. Why am I dealing with this? But it's not unique, sadly.
No, that's the real sad part.
But that's the power of speaking it. You sort of figuring out if you're to blame for it in the aftermath. There'll be so many women in the situation trying to figure out if they're at fault somehow. And to hear you say it took you 10, 15 years to finally get out, is that the length of time it took for you to process it and realise that it wasn't your fault?
Yeah, absolutely. And still, even on your dark days, you go, well, I think now I can truly sit back and go, well, I'm 48 years old, 16. How young are you? Like, how mature are you? And also being so far away from home. It's like, none of that was my fault. None of that. That's squarely on them. And they know it. And I'm glad they know it. Yeah. But you're right. It's just what then happens after that. And that sort of self-doubt and hatred that can manifest itself. And, luckily, I decided I had an opportunity to reinvent myself in college and university in the States, and had really good support systems around me and friends. None of them knew, but I just immersed myself in wanting to, take advantage of this opportunity and do as much as I could in that time.
Yeah, I wanted to. Obviously, a female locker room is not an experience that either of us have had. But given that it's
you're right.
but given that it's an issue which plagues or has plagued women's sport, is it something that's shared amongst players, or is it just unspoken? We just deal with it ourselves.
Back then, certainly was. I think we carried it. I think everyone carried their own shit. I think now I would like to think that there is a sense that you've got a wider support structure out there and you're not going to be judged as well. What I have loved about growing up and maturing, but then also being in a position where you can kind of feel like you can mentor and support and reach down. Sorry, what is that? Oh, microphone.
We can do a double mic if you.
Is to give that that sort of a platform and experience and help share. And I think there is a sense that there is a much better sisterhood, sense of sisterhood than there was back then. We were still sort of trying to find our way and trying to climb over each other, and that was in sport or the business environment. Like, we're not helping out her because that's me, and board and governance and all that kind of stuff. It's all been kind of well documented. I love that sort of camaraderie that's happening now with women in sport and other areas of society. I reached out to Sarah Hiddeny, who freaking legend.
Bloody good podcast episode as well. Let's just go back and listen to that one if you get a chance.
I will. And we're generations apart, but and I've only worked with her very little. I've worked with her, but she kind of, I think, she knows who I am outside of the rugby world. So she, was really engaged. And I reached out to her just recently because of her knee injury. And then Charlize Ledger-Walker went down with a knee injury. And I was like almost in tears. So gutted for her. She'll be fine. She'll come back stronger. But I thought, hang on, maybe Sarah would have something for Charlize, or Charlize might get some benefit out of talking to Sarah, and you kind of connect them up. Never met each other, and they're both like, hey, Cham, hey, Ledge, It's just cool. It's a much more supportive environment, I think, now for women to be able to lean on women. Then I think in our day we were still a little bit competitive and didn't want to share that weakness because of what it would mean. What would it mean if people knew that? Oh my God, the shame. My coaches, I don't know, would they send me home? There's all the things that go through your head because it's my fault.
Again, the power of speaking up and showing leadership and doing it, because what is the first advice you would give if someone, it'd be to tell someone, right? Like speak up and let people know, because it's not going to be the doom and gloom you think it is. People are going to be supportive.
And also, you didn't do this.
Yeah.
This is not on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to move that along, thank you so much for sharing. But as you move that along into college, it obviously affects you and sort of changes the way that you are. And asking around, a few people have said, we only came home once across 4 years at college. And I'm wondering if that's...
Expensive flights back then.
Yeah. But I'd heard that, at times you were sleeping in the car in between seasons and like it was really hard and difficult and tough. And I'm wondering if it's the dad back home and it's this that's happened and then you're there by yourself, like looking back now, how do you reflect on that?
Self-destructing. And we talked about alcohol. Alcohol played a big part in numbing that, pain and numbing that guilt. And I think you're also young and in university, the college scene. But I think all that, again, my mum doesn't know any of this. So, sorry, Mum. But I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm thriving. And you have your tribulations and trials. But, I was sleeping on couches. I didn't get home in summers, so I had a very good friend who was a year ahead of me, and she was probably a terrible influence. She was anorexic and probably a functioning alcoholic, and we vibed, and she became my best mate. She also hated going home. She was from Philly and she had a house, but she'd always be falling out with her mum. So every now and then we got to stay at her house, but mostly we were sleeping in her car, or we were doing camps during the week, but that would house you from Sunday to Friday, and then we had to figure something else out from Friday to Sunday. And a lot of times it was just go out so you didn't have to sleep anywhere and just keep going. We used to break into school. So St. Joe's had run summer schools, and we would know how to flip open the windows in the sort of common room, and the dorms would be all locked, but you could sleep in the common rooms.
Just to contrast this sort of difficult time, at the same time killing it in basketball. And we haven't spoke much about what a talent you were, but everyone we spoke to was like, she was unreal. And leading into your senior year at St. Joseph's and your standout player, and the timing couldn't be more perfect because the first year of the, what's the YNBA?
Yeah.
W. Sorry.
W.
YNBA?
I just lost my train of thought.
Desperately searching to read like WNBA.
The Ernest and Young NBA.
But it's a double whammy, right? Because in that time frame, Sydney Olympics is on the
horizon.
horizon.
You just pick up his fuck up.
The YMCA. Sydney Olympics is on the horizon.
Yep.
YMCA.
And the YMCA is booming over there. And you're able to find a bed there between Friday and Sunday, and it's going great. Sydney 2000 on the horizon. And the women's NBA is about to be launched in this sort of time period. So has that lit a fuse in you that, actually basketball could be a thing for me?
Yeah. I mean, because like everyone, you sort of at that age, you're like, I have no idea what I'm going to do with my life. It took me 4 majors to land on sociology. it was after my sophomore year. I didn't declare my major until my junior year, so I had no idea what I was going to do. And what the hell are you going to do with sociology? But I came home my sophomore year and played for New Zealand. First time I represented New Zealand, and it was the Olympic qualifying. It was world qualifying tournament for 1996. But at the time we were home, 1995, they awarded Sydney with the Olympics, and we knew then that Australia, being host nation, automatically qualify. The FIBA qualification through that time was one team from Oceania. So with Australia out of the way, we had to qualify against the Pacific Island nations. So it was, a really good chance that New Zealand was going to be that second team for men and women. So from my junior year, which was 95 to 96, I now had a plan. I had a kind of 5-year goal and aspiration to play as much basketball, do as well as I could to make sure that I made that team in Sydney 2000. And that was 2 years of college, finished up. And then halfway through my senior year was the WNBA announcement. And that was sort of one of those surreal moments because it was a little bit, there'd been a league and it was professional, but it was, I wasn't getting really much traction, and there was rumours that it was going to fold. And so, okay, well, I'll end up in Luxembourg or Iceland or something playing. And then they announced that WNBA was going to be played, and all the teams that were backing it, and it was all the big hype and marketing, power of the NBA coming out. And it couldn't have come at a better time because I was in my senior year. So just timing. We had a really great team, had a good year, so performed really well. And went to a few trials with my coach, Steph Gately. She sort of ferried me around and paid for me to get on planes and trains and end up I went to 3 trials, made the Utah team, found out just the night before graduation. And my parents and my 2 brothers had come for my graduation. I was at a trial in New York, and I was supposed to trial on the Sunday of graduation, and I made it through to the final cut. But I spoke to the coaches there, and I said, "Look, I just be straight up. Am I going to make the team?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, "Cool, I'll go back to graduation then." So I'll take my chances on Utah. And that night Utah rang and said, get on a plane in 2 days. So my poor parents had flown, for the first time ever to Philadelphia, got picked up, driven to New York, seen graduation. Then I buggered off 2 days later to Utah. They followed me about a week later and hung out there for about a week and then left again.
You've done a great job in summarising that story, but to put context around it, it's 300 to 400 players trying to get the last 16 spots on the roster. Is that right?
Times that by 8. So you had 300 to 400 players trying to make 2 spots on each roster. So a 300, 400 in each of the 8 franchises.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So
not just for the
whole thing.
Right.
No. So you trialled individually with the teams. So when they came out with the 8 teams, they drafted for the first 10 spots, and they kept the last 2 spots open for open trialists, and each team held their open trials.
Oh, I thought it was like nationally 300 to 400.
No. So I was down in Charlotte, then went to Utah, then went up to New York. So each of those individual trials, there was 300, 400 girls there.
Wow.
And each team selected 2 for the team and 2 reserves. So you had a chance of 4 spots.
I've heard you talk about.
How can you not be proud of that? Like I know, but fuck.
That's what I was going to get to. I've heard you say that at the time, because it didn't get coverage and people weren't, this was this amazing thing you were doing, but people weren't really getting hyped about it. No. You kind of made excuses for, but I doesn't play that many minutes and all this sort of stuff. But now, looking back, you are proud of it?
Yeah.
What changed? Where does that, what changed?
I reckon Labour coming into power changed that. And Grant Robertson standing up in his first speech as the sport minister saying, women in sport is a priority for this government. And it genuinely, took that kind of vision and spotlight to start to change the perception of everything from 2017 to now, 3 World Cups and maturing to go, oh, wow, what I did really does matter. Because then I started getting invited to speak at panels or do this or do that. And every time I said the story and people were like, oh, that's amazing. I'm like, so you're clapping? You mustn't have known that. But if Sean Marks stepped in a room, people would know Sean Marks. And look, I'm not comparing the two of us because he's a phenomenal person, basketball player, now general manager, and a great mate. But it was different when he made the league the following year. It was a much bigger, deal and announcement. And from that, when the government decided that they were going to put a focus on women's sport and a lot of different, opportunities to talk and to be valued came about, was when I started to own my story and own my success, because it got a little bit, I think, when you go, then it's a little bit old when you go, oh, no, not me. Oh, no, it wasn't a big deal. Yeah, actually, no, it is. It is a big deal when you look back at it now. But it did take a little bit of that external validation for it to feel like, oh, no, I can be proud of this. People actually do think it's cool. And the funny thing is, like, people would always say to me, like, they'd know me for, it happened at rugby, it happened in all these other places I work, and they'll like know me for about, a year and a half, 2 years, and they'll come up and go, I didn't know you went to 2 Olympics. I mean, no, why would I introduce myself as, hi, I'm Megan, I went to 2 Olympics. And in my head, I go, I went to 2 Olympics with all those other teammates of mine that went to 2 Olympics. So it's not just a me thing. There's incredible women and, our Tall Blacks as well who've, represented New Zealand. So I always had that lens on. But to your point, it was a real good opportunity to start to celebrate that and own it a little bit and be proud of what I did achieve. And that started helping the self-healing process as well.
And it must be wicked validation as well when a Sean Marks or a Stephen Adams corrects media and says, no, actually.
Steve has always done that.
Yeah.
Like, what a dude. He's always done that. I think he did it on JJ Redick's podcast not long ago. And I just got so many messages like, whoa. Because he's like, no, I'm the third. There's Megan Compain first and then Sean and then me.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because it can be only one first, right? It's just fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're stepping into it now. Because even me, I'll put my hand up and I was one of those casual sports fans that had no idea until
I thought it was the WNBA.
The YMCA, the first ever.
No, but after that season in the WNBA, you had 3 years in Europe. But what, as a professional basketball player, but what does that look like?
Yeah, it varies greatly. Yeah, I did, and that was that goal to graduate in '97, made the WNBA, which was great, and that probably did give me the springboard to get visibility for teams to sign me up to play in Europe, and all I wanted to do was play as much basketball as I could between then and the 2000 Olympics. Majority of the team that represented the Tall Ferns at the Olympics were full-time workers back here in New Zealand playing the WNBL or whatever version of, the local league.
YNBL, I think.
The YNBL.
Oh, God. A long time before you lived that one down, my friend. A long time before you lived that one down.
Yeah, you guys are too football focused. You're in your feeler.
Yeah.
So there was only a few of us that were going, I'm going to go play professionally, whether the opportunity or the means to. So there's probably me, Gina Farmer, Bex Cotton, literally like 3 out of the 12. And everyone else were school teachers or working in office jobs or students. And so that was just that real drive to go, I know that for me to be the best that I can be, I have to play because I've never had to juggle. Various levels of professionalism, I'd say. Germany was great. Had a blast in Germany. That was a fantastic year in Germany. The same club that Dirk Nowitski's from. So he was still in Germany. It was a lockout year, so he ended up staying in Würzburg for about 4 months before he went to the NBA. And I used to train with him and his coach, Holger. and just do shooting drills and stuff. So that's why I was trying to get that step back, Dirk Nowitski step back. And he's funny though, because he's still if I see Dirk, and I saw him in Manila for the.
If I see Dirk, I love those flexes that we have on the podcast every now and again. They're so good.
If I see Dirk and Steve, good story about Dirk and Steve and Mark Cuban.
It's on the notes.
Yeah, we're getting there.
So it was great. I mean, Finland as well. The league, Germany was a very good league at the time. Finland was a kind of emerging league, but still, still playing D1, still. Making ends meet, being able to eat. You usually get housed and sometimes a car. Didn't have a car in Finland. It was too frosty, too much snow around. But I would be able to save enough money to eat and enough money to fly home. Basically, that was all I could kind of hope for.
But still, media-wise, under the radar.
Oh, totally under the radar. Yeah. No, I mean, but there'd be women playing in Europe now, New Zealanders, that would be totally under the radar. There's a really awesome female that just won championships in France. France is the best league in Europe, and nobody would really know. Yeah, so it's still pretty much under the radar.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying your story, and I love the contrast of the adversity growing up, the tough times in high school and basketball. And I'm about to put you at a point, it's kind of like the start of your sort of professional career, but someone who, from the start has achieved all of this in this glowing CV. But I want to read your own words to kind of bring you to this point. You say, at the end of my professional basketball career, I'd played in the WNBA,
Nice.
had 3 professional seasons in Europe, represented New Zealand for 10 years and played in 2 Olympic Games, and I had a sum total of $2,438 in my bank account. I had no real work experience to speak of, and I was 2 weeks away from my 29th birthday, living broke in London. Take us there.
Yeah. Luckily, I'd met a man the year before when I lived in Wales, and we did this sort of dance with. I'd met him when I was playing basketball in Wales, and then came home to do Athens Olympics, and we'd stayed in touch, and we were obviously going to try to. I was getting back to London, but we were still doing the. Are you going to go flatting? Are you going to go move in? There was a little bit of that dance, and I was sitting there going, "Please ask me to move in. I can't afford to not." Yeah. And it was that first sort of. I spent 2 years retired after the Sydney Olympics and moved to the States and spent more time living in closets and on couches. But London was basketball's done. It's over. I have a job, but it's paying me £20,000 a year. So not a lot of money. And it was I just was relishing in the freedom though. I think like anyone, you go, I've spent how many years with every single weekend taken up with sport, either playing mid-season or, training or moving around the world and not knowing where I was going to be. So I kind of knew then that Carlos was the one. It took us 7 years to actually make it official, but it was that freedom moment. So it didn't actually matter. I was earning 20 grand. I was happiest that I've ever been. But there was an element of, I was also just done with basketball, which took me a long time to come back to it. As I said, I'm stoked to be back now. And maybe because of that, I've just done all of this. I've tried so hard to, I've represented New Zealand. I've sacrificed so much. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what does it mean? I'm so on the bones of my ass and I'm 29. And so when I left Athens, I didn't get on the team plane home to New Zealand. So I just walked out and, there's nobody asked, nobody cared. We'd done quite well in Athens. We'd beaten China and gone to the quarterfinals. So, but still, it just didn't matter. None of it mattered. And I think I was just really done. But I was the happiest I was in those first few days in London, just going, I'm free. Now I can kind of make it up and see where we're at.
So what did you do?
Well, I worked for this company. I hope they're never going to listen to this. I worked for this company called Roots Sport, and they were the distributors of And1 in the UK because I'd worked for And1, so I'd convinced them to give me a job when I came back. And And it was one of those serendipitous, luck timing. About 2 months in, I got a call from a guy at Adidas via some connection, not Xeon, and said, "We want you to apply for this role. There's a sports marketing job going. Really like you. I've heard about you through this. And come to Amsterdam because that's where the job's going to be, and interview and give it a go." And I did. I interviewed for it, got it. Then they moved it to Germany, which was a slightly different proposition, leaving London to go to Nuremberg rather than Amsterdam. But I actually lied to Roots Sport. I said that because I felt so guilty. And I said that Carlos had got a job.
Someone will be listening.
I knew it. Maybe a Kiwi that works for them going, "Oh my God, I got the scoop."
I know, and they were such amazing people. I like 2 brothers, awesome people. And but I just couldn't. I didn't have the heart to tell them. And we were going to be moving in May, and they're like, "Oh, do you want to do some work from over there? And you can work remotely." I was like, yeah, nah, it's probably going to be a bit hard. And then I ended up, having to then tell them like, "Oh, just by chance I got a job at Adidas, while you're there." So that's how I got into the, sort of world of sports, like real proper sports marketing.
I feel like you're going to downplay this. But were you very good at the Roots and the And One stuff to allow you to get the Adidas role?
Well, it was probably the And One before that. So when I was in the States, and that was the, my first job, proper job, which was And One. Again, Steph Gately, who played a massive role in my life, basketball wise, and here, it was between 99 and 2000, and it was 2000. So just after I finished in Finland, I went home to do the basketball, try to make the Olympics thing via the US. And I said to her, "I want to come back after the Olympics." And I said, "And One's just up the road. Do you know anyone?" She's like, "Oh yeah, I know this guy." So got me in touch with him, and I basically went up there and just introduced myself and said, "You should hire me because I'm going to be an Olympic basketball player, and I'm a Kiwi, and I'm sort of playing into all these things. If you're a basketball company, you want an Olympian on your books. Like no experience, no skill set as such, but they ended up giving me a job and had to fight for this highly skilled migrant visa worker as well. They basically got through on the back of me being an Olympian, which meant nothing to what I was actually doing. But that gave me the kind of 2 years working with those guys, and then left to then pursue the Athens Olympic opportunity. But there was a guy at And One who was a Turkish guy, and he left and went to Adidas, and that's how I got connected through Adidas. So it's all just absolute fate and luck and
good relationship management.
Good relationship management. Argos was awesome, and so got to Adidas via. But again, I was in a role where being an Olympian, being a double Olympian at that stage, and having good personal relationship skills really helped. And it's kind of feel like you can learn the job. If you can connect with people, it takes you a really long way. It's like I try to say to, young athletes now, particularly ones that are in these environments where you have to be professional. So you're all about sport. Yeah, it's really hard to think outside of that. But you've got all these other opportunities where you're meeting commercial partners and New Zealand CEOs and, all this sort of stuff. It's like just try to connect on some level, and it would be such a big difference. And
what are your keys to connecting with people?
I just sort of went in a room and thought, sliding doors, like any conversation could open up a world of opportunities that you just don't know about. And that's kind of how I managed to think about things, I guess. But also just using it as a absolute necessity, because I didn't have $100,000 in my bank account to fall back on post playing days. So you have to try to be innovative.
Hustlers mentality, yeah.
Innovative. Innovators.
Brilliant. Okay, so you start climbing the ladder at Adidas, and I'm going to link you back up to New Zealand Rugby. But before, we're going to do a little interlude, and we've got 4 stories we're going after with names.
With intent.
Yeah.
4 stories with intent.
So give them as much or as little as you want. But yeah, we are interested in the partying with Steve Nash and Mark Cuban. What was that one?
Yeah, that was All-Star Weekend 2001. And I was working for And One in Philly, or just outside of Philly, All-Star weekends in Philly, and I'd spent, season playing in Würzburg, and so knew Dirk, and had met Steve in I'd met Steve a couple of times randomly, actually.
He had the hots for you, didn't he?
Oh, no, I definitely had the. I actually don't.
He made eyes at you. He made eyes at you.
We spoke to Steve.
Steve Nash, everybody.
Fuck, that would be awesome.
He did. You're right.
Yeah, I know he did.
In Utah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Random. Yeah, but I had a boyfriend,
only
so I
human.
was like,
Yeah.
sorry, mate. Because we were going to go out to a movie and I was like, nah, yeah, yes, no, I shouldn't. And I said no, to Steve Nash. Yeah, random. Yes, there was a lot of unusual random connections with Steve, but nothing ever happened. So we were Dirk was and Steve were both playing in the All-Star weekend, and there's a guy that was best mates with Dirk, German guy that I did actually spend a bit of time with when I was in Germany for that season, and we'd stayed friends and stayed in touch, and so he came over for it, so we were just hanging with them and ended up in New York one night at a some kind of bar club thing, straight upstairs into the VIP area with, as you can imagine, just gorgeous, stunning people in, dressed to the nines. And there's me, this guy, Mutf, my brother Craig, who'd flown in from somewhere, Dirk and Steve in jeans and T-shirts and trainers, and we were just hanging at a table, and my brother and I were like, this is a bit big time. Mark Cuban rolls in, eyes like saucers. Wasn't drinking a lot. But the table's full of Grey Goose, and was just sitting there. I was a little bit nervous, excited, and ended up knocking. I talked with my hands. It was my Nana thing, and knocked over a whole bottle of Grey Goose. I was like, tried to mop it up. It's $500 a bottle. And he came back. Mark Cuban was like, don't worry about it. Puts 3 on the table. My brother and I were like, we should probably buy a round of shots. And Dirk's like, nah, don't. Just don't. I was on $32,000 a year.
This guy has all of the money in the world.
He's like, don't. And I was like, no, we should. I feel bad. Man, Craig, let's go up and buy a round and we'll split it. It's like a round costs like $600 or something like that. And I was just like, American.
Yeah.
And we're just like kind of gagging, and Dirk's like, I told you. we ended up going back to Dirk's hotel early, and he stayed out, and wake up in the morning, here's me and my brother laying in the big double Super King bed asleep. Here's Dirk on a chaise lounge in the corner, like fetal position, the day of the All-Star game.
No,
amazing.
We had to go. Yeah, we all hoofed it back to Philly on an early train, and those guys had to play. But we had another good night out with him in Philly as well, where I swapped shoes with Steve. Ended up with different. He ended up with one of mine, and one of his. We had same size shoes, so who would know? Yeah, good times.
Good times.
They say.
Good start. All
Good
right, and the timeline's going to be all over the place here, but you had a Michael Jordan sort of brief interaction.
2 interludes, I think.
Yes, 2 interludes. Yes. The first one, Ashley Stanley actually wrote about that quite well in that locker room article. 1997, named to the Utah Stars team. We get brought out to Utah. Utah's in the finals with the Bulls, and they were playing that game 6. I think it was game 5. So the food poisoning / Michael Jordan flu game. We get put out at halftime in front of the sellout crowd to introduce us as the new Utah Stars team. We leave, sitting in an area, watch the end of the game, and then go back to stage because our cars were parked. My RAV4 was parked in the players' car park next to all the Bentleys and G-Wagons, and Michael Jordan was basically walking down the hallway getting held up by 2 of his people, and he was done. And that was the game where he hit the winning buzzer shot and took it back to game 6 where I think they won in Chicago. So we sort of crossed in the hallway, and it was just sort of one of those, whoa, like if I was on, if it was now, you'd be snapping away on social media.
Did you have a moment of like, he's a giant of a man?
Oh,
like
but he was so slouched.
I guess,
So he was just 6'6", but just, floppy because he was like ashen. Just like, you know, people say, well, how sick was he? He was like, oh, no, he was pretty sick. Last dance was only when we found out that he thought he was food poisoned. Everyone just thought he still had the flu. And then the second time was at an All-Star game working for Adidas in New Orleans. And so it was after Hurricane Katrina, the NBA took the All-Star weekend to New Orleans, which was pretty cool. And at Adidas, I worked 4 All-Star weekends in a row. And then I had that one out in Philly randomly. These were all, I was on official business. And I just flown in, and we were all at a bar at one of the hotels where most of the legends and things were staying. And sitting at a bar, chatting to a few people, and I was like, I'll go call Carlos in Amsterdam, just tell him I got here safely and all good. So days before FaceTime too, so it was an actual call.
Steve's not here.
But I did. Steve had retired by the stage.
Don't worry, honey, Steve's not here this time around.
You're safe. I said no once. And so we went out to this big, it was like a big courtyard, and the hotel's over there and the bar was over here. And so there was like all these doors leading out to the courtyard, and I was literally standing in the middle of the courtyard all by myself, and I saw the door open. This guy walk through. 6'6" is not actually big though. It's crazy now. But if you're living in the world of basketball, that's kind of normal.
Basketball world. You've got to
basketball
normalise
world.
You've got to preface it with that comment.
And I'd lived basketball world forever. I was playing with 6'6", like girls on the team. So 6'6" is kind of normal, especially an All-Star weekend.
Yeah, 5'11".
But it was that moment where you go on a good day.
With heels.
Yeah. And it was enough of a walk where you could kind of, there's no way to avoid each other. There's only the two of us in this big courtyard. And I was on the phone chatting away, and I looked up, and it was literally Michael Jordan. And he goes, whatever they say, all right.
Is he Canadian?
All right. Welsh.
You know what he's like.
Yeah.
Those 6'6"s are all crazy accents.
How are you doing? I don't know what he's like. So there was an acknowledgement, and I kind of just looked at him, and he just kept walking, obviously, but into the bar where I was. And it's like, fuck, it was Michael Jordan just literally walked past. I was like, it's a funny thing is to say I wasn't a fan, but there's those kinds of people you can't help just go, like this little breath inside you, like,
just the greatest of all time.
The heart sort of starts racing, and then I was like, oh, calm down.
Well, the other one, I don't know if it was a moment, but a young Kobe Bryant.
Oh, yeah. Kobe used to train at St. Joe's.
Yeah.
My university.
That is wild.
Yeah. Kid Kobe, we used to call him. So he was probably started coming around more our junior, senior year. And the summer before, so he was a big deal, his senior year in high school. That's when he took Brandy to the prom and all that sort of Hollywood stuff. And then, so his senior in high school was my senior in college, and he was always in the gym training. And then he got drafted, what was it, like April or June or whatever it is. And I was still there because I'd just been out and training and WNBA stuff. And it was funny because when he got named to the draft, all of a sudden he couldn't park his car in the car park. It just got pulled straight up out front, like it was valet or something, and no one there to valet it, bro. And then all of a sudden he signs his contract with Adidas, which was worth millions and millions and millions of dollars, and he has to wear sunglasses inside. So we were actually giving him shit.
Yeah, really.
Like, come on, bro, calm down. But we spent a lot of time when I finished the WNBA season before he went out to LA. There was about a month where we were training in the gym. So the weights gym, and a lot of times it was him and I and his trainer, this little dude, can't remember his name, but he was about 5'4", Italian-American guy that he used to literally squat like on his shoulders, so that sort of thing. But yeah, Kobe was, he was Kid Kobe, which is crazy.
Did you cross paths with him ever again?
I did see him once more at an All-Star game and said g'day. And he kind of acknowledged and recognised, and it was enough of like a hey, St. Joe's, that kind of thing.
Man, that's some
But I know, like, and it's crazy to think, fast forward 15 years and that absolute tragedy that occurred, I actually sort of felt like, oh, that's heavy.
Yeah.
It's heavy. I didn't necessarily like the player he became, not the player, but but he's such a competitor, right? You either love that or hate that. And I just, I've never wanted that. I've never had that competitive streak that kind of at all costs, like relationships and, being a dick.
Was he in the USA team for 2004?
And 2000, I want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't see him in Athens? You didn't cross paths?
Yeah, no, not really.
I know
no.
they stayed on a cruise ship, actually.
Yeah, in Athens they stayed on a cruise ship. But, we didn't see – we saw a lot we sort of, like walking past a lot of times in the gym in Sydney. In Athens they were so isolated, kind of came in and out for games and that was it.
I can't let an Olympic opportunity go without asking.
Yao Ming?
Oh, sure. Go Yao Ming. I was actually going to say food court, McDonald's. Did you hoover?
Oh, jeez, here we go.
Did you
Seamus and his cheeseburger story.
Did you hoover anything up?
Wraps. We did the wraps. Yeah. Well, we were a bit trying to be sensible. But you know who did hoover? Chinese gymnasts.
Really?
Yeah.
McDonald's?
Yeah. Yeah. Big time. Big
Okay.
time. Yeah. Yeah. Probably post competition.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was just there and, free, and the gymnasts, I probably don't eat much outside of that.
I did 12 in one sitting.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Had to mention it.
You can't. Every time there's an Olympian, you've got to...
Got to ask about the McDonald's.
All right. I'm going to move us on. That was a brilliant little celebrity interlude. I love these little sections with such good names there. But I want to pull you back to New Zealand and I want to get into rugby stuff. So how did that window open? What did the connection to New Zealand rugby look like?
Adidas, actually. So when I was working for Adidas, but albeit in a basketball role, there was only a handful of Kiwis at any one time in the global office. So there was also the CFO of Adidas, so second to the CEO, was a Kiwi at the time, and he was there for a very long time. And he had a really good way of bringing the New Zealanders all together, and of course everyone feeling really proud about the New Zealand Rugby All Blacks relationship. And when I was there, 2005, All Blacks come to Northern Hemisphere during that window that they play. And I grew up, never really watching a rugby game.
Really?
Oh, no. God, no. No. I mean, short of doing myself out of a job, because I fully appreciate and respect and, the sport now. But, there is a little bit of a chip on your shoulder when you play a non-traditional New Zealand sport. And, I have a lot more animosity towards netball, obviously. But but rugby was just, just not interested.
Wow,
but as you say, I was flipping through Slam magazines. And
Yeah.
so the first rugby game, All Blacks game I ever went to was when I worked for Adidas. And it was in Ireland, and it was the year that the stand burnt down at Lansdowne Road, 2005. And the only reason I went is because we were Kiwis and they were giving out tickets. So we're like, yeah, have a trip to Dublin. I haven't been to Dublin before, and we'll tack on the rugby game. But through that time I was there, there were opportunities to meet Steve Chu, really. And because I was working basketball, Adidas had just signed the NBA relationship, so that was of interest. When the rugby boys were out there, said, do you want to come and meet some of the NBA executives and learn a bit more about the NBA? So there was a lot of that kind of crossover opportunity. I hosted a heap of NBA people at rugby games because especially in Europe, the Europeans loved it. A lot of French and English NBA supporters. Fun fact: in 2007. I had David Stern and Adam Silver down for a final if we made it in France.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
At least you had 2 weeks to tell them that it wasn't going to be on.
Yeah, change your plans. Change your plans. I reckon David would have pulled out, but I would have got Adam. Adam would have come. And as it was, I had tickets for the semi-finals. I was supposed to be hosting all these French NBA people to a rugby game. And it wasn't the All Blacks, but it was France, so they were real happy. So there was an awesome, connection point there, and I got to know Steve really well, and I got to know Shandy really well. And when we were looking to leave Europe and come home, we travelled for a year And halfway through that travel year, 2009, there was a job that came up for the All Blacks. So Adidas sponsorship manager. So in the commercial team, but predominantly looking after Adidas as one of their key partners. So I ended up applying for the job. We were in Ecuador, I want to say. Yes, so applied for a job in Ecuador, interviewed in Peru, and got offered the job in Bolivia. So it was just this whole, and the interview process was pretty hilarious as well, because we were in Bolivia and there was no, couldn't get any sort of Skype, but couldn't get any internet coverage. So I had to do it on a mobile phone, and it was real bad delay, and it was real, basically I had to talk and then say over, and then they talked. It was like a trucker call. And it was hard to get a bit of a read, but I thought that I was vibing, and I thought, and I knew the one guy, Todd Barbarao, who ended up being my manager for a lot of years there, and is now a really great mate. I'd known him when I was with Adidas, and so I thought that I had a good vibe. And at the end of the call, they asked me if I had any questions, and I said I had a few questions, and then I said the same. Have you got any questions of me? And the HR guy said, "Oh, well, we've had some really great candidates, and they've been here, so we've been able to sit across the table with them, and I mean, this is pre-COVID and pre-Zoom and that, so it's like, so it's just a little bit harder to get a real feel and connection, and I mean, I don't even know what you look like." And I said, "Oh, well, just Google me then."
Oh, yeah, nice.
and I'm like, and it's just silence on the phone. So I get off the call. Apparently, the HR guy goes around to Todd Barbarao and goes, "Who the fuck do you think she is?" Google Meet, like going off, like arrogant, this, that, and the other thing. Anyway, they offered me the job, but they made me sweat for it. It was like good 3 weeks. And when you're on holiday, 3 weeks is a long time. But I got the job, and I started at New Zealand Rugby, and apparently the Google Me story got
made the rounds.
Made the rounds. So the first time I met Piri Weepu, and it was like, "Oh, g'day, Google." Like,
oh, really?
Yeah,
that's nice.
Yeah. So Joe Locking and Piri Weepu nicknamed me Google. So that was how I got involved in rugby.
Yeah, I spoke to Steve Chu about what's some examples of stuff like Megan did, and he's like, well, after the 2015 World Cup, she'd organised all these jerseys. So it had back the black. But then he wasn't, if he'd been aware that they had been made before they'd won, he would have been furious. So it's that was the sort of thing you were doing behind the scenes, is producing these and getting them over there and getting them distributed and all this sort of stuff.
And having a very solid plan if it hadn't won
that's
to get shredded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you've got a plan for both those scenarios, right?
Yeah. You have to have them.
And parades as well. Are you sorting out parades for if it happens?
No, I was quite lucky. I got let off the parade. We had an amazing event manager who kind of was, dialed in and managed all of that. So I kind of got them to the point of World Cup final, and then I was able to dip out, luckily. So I didn't have to do much of the parade work. But you're right, there is a code of conduct of what you can and can't say and who you can and can't talk to before, at 2 weeks minus, so we've won a quarterfinal. Okay, well, there's a likelihood that we could potentially, and then it gets tighter and tighter, and you get to World Cup final, and last year there would have been a plan for what happens when the team arrive, should they have been carrying the World Cup home, because you can't mobilise a city, without any kind of pre-planning. It's just very, very tight.
What's that stock worth that you might have to set up in flames?
Well, what Steve only saw was the 200 that got delivered to the team hotel for the team and partners. What he didn't know was the 20,000 that was sitting at distribution sites all around the world getting ready to hit shelves.
Legit. That is a proper budget exercise as well, that you've got to write off that at the end of the year.
Well, that's an Adidas expense. So they see that. I mean, it's like championship, hats and and tees the minute they come out. They're wearing them, so they've got to be pre-manufactured.
So for all the gags about Kobe Bryant wearing Adidas sunglasses inside once he signed that endorsement deal, that essentially is what you kind of had to do, right? Was to make sure that Addy's obligations, or the All Black New Zealand Rugby's obligations for Addy were being met.
Yeah, yeah, and then times that by the rest of the commercial partners that are that are feeding money into the machine.
So are you brand police for a lot of those kind of things?
Yeah, sadly.
Take those off.
Yeah,
watches, glasses.
Yeah, you can't have those headphones on.
Don't get started on watches. Oh my God. Oh yeah, and there was a headphone partner for a wee while there. I think we've simplified it a bit, but it is a bit of that brand Nazi kind of stuff. But the way I kind of want to approach it, and I'll take the player's lead from it as well, is like, how can we do this better? What kind of information do you want to know, and how do you want to receive it? Because, and this is absolutely no criticism of what's come before, but it's the beauty of me being able to solely focus on this space, is that I can think about how do we deliver that message to the players. Yeah, the obligations, but equally like the understanding and behind why they're there and what it means, and looking at like, don't do this, don't do that, rather than that message, the message of when you do this, this is what happens, and this is the value that is attached to it, and this is what a brand like Adidas, why a brand like Adidas is 25 years in partnership with New Zealand Rugby, and actually start to, these players are all, commercial beasts now. They understand the power and the value of their brand. So we've got to match that with your aspirations as an individual with the, what we need to really deliver in the team. But how can we, rather than getting into conflict, how can we support your aspirations over here, but equally, deliver what we need to deliver in this environment?
Have you had any majors where something slipped through the gap
that you can reveal?
Yeah, that you can talk about whilst maintaining your professional integrity for your upcoming role.
Well, nothing in this current role, because we haven't had an assembly yet. We didn't even have an named All Black team. But it's just niggly stuff, and a lot of times it's just education.
No one notices but you and the brand, right?
The brand, yeah. But the people that notice in the brand is the CEO, because something goes out on social and it's like taken off real quick, and then the days of even when I started, and it was Facebook was kind of a thing, but there was no Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok or anything like that. It was a lot easier to sort of fly under the radar, and you kind of go back to like Dan Carter never breached his obligations. It's like, yeah, but nobody knew what Dan Carter was doing, other than when he was stepping out on the field as an All Black, because, you weren't really posting it. Yeah. So, the cameras are just everywhere. So it's just for us to be a lot more aware and aligned. But it's our responsibility to make sure the players are put in a good situation, like that they're not, because a lot of times it's like watches. We've got a wonderful watch partner called Tudor, who are the baby company of Rolex. And they're amazing, and their watches are beautiful, but hardly ever worn when you're a rugby player, because you're running from that to that to that to that. But then when they sit in front of media and they put their hand up like that, and they've got their Garmin on or their Apple on, it's like, let's switch it off. So, but it's, so I think it's we've got to have, as management, a lot greater awareness to putting these players in these situations that they can succeed, rather than them, doing something that 9 times out of 10 is completely, it's not malicious. It's incidental.
Yeah. And does your experience as a former athlete help in getting that message across?
I hope so. I really hope so. There's probably 2 reasons why I was successful in getting the job. And one, because I've got the commercial background experience of working with New Zealand Rugby and some of those commercial partners like an Adidas. But 2 is because I was in a high-performance environment. I was a high-performance athlete. One of the most, the biggest compliments I was ever paid was by Steve Hansen when I first started, when he took over the reins, and then I started getting a lot more integrated with the team on the other side. Is, he said to me, what you're really, really good at is knowing when to be around, more importantly, when to not be around. So I kind of see that as there's times to have a conversation, there's times to just completely walk away, because this is not going to serve anyone's purpose. And I looked at it and it was less about what they must do and what they can do and they can't do, versus to try to build some level of relationship and trust, so that when when I was asking them something, they knew that it was, coming from a place of respect and, rather than a place of authority. It's going to be really interesting though, because I am in a different role now, and it is you've got to have that professional distance, but and I mean, shit, I'm so much older than these guys now. When I started, Brad Thorne and I were the same age. So it is a little bit different, a little bit easier. But I think it's just coming at it from a place of respect and understanding what they're going through performance-wise to get them to where we need to get them to in front of the media or in front of commercial partners.
Could those conversations with Steve Hansen get niggly when you first started?
Oh, totally. I mean, yes, absolutely. There's like the obvious stuff. If we're asking guys to sprint, lengths at a promo and they pull a calf, then that's obviously affecting performance. But there might be some stuff that you wouldn't actually assume, but it might be that competitive kind of mental advantage. I mean, Steve was deep. He was so deep, and he had such a good, view, and he was, he had an understanding and a view on everything. So you needed to, really share and really be upfront. And we made mistakes and learnt from them. I think that was the key. If you do something, I don't like that, or that didn't go so well, it's like, yep, cool. We understand that when we realise what we need to do to not do it again. So, 9 out of 10 times get it right, but that one time you don't want to get it so wrong that it does start to impact what happens on Saturday, because ultimately everyone's here for that team to win on Saturday. The partners are here for that team to win on Saturday. The fans are, media are effectively. So it's that balance. I think everyone wants the same thing.
Is it like when the AIG clients are popping champagne bottles on the side of the field before the game against France in 2014?
Have you interviewed Gregor Paul? It's so confronting reading that book, Black Gold. I talked to Gregor about this when I started, actually. I read the book before I did the interview for this job. It was really fascinating because the first third was about, all the historical stuff of Adidas and how they came on board, and that was really interesting, to then that kind of post-AIG era. And I was at that I was responsible for the champagne popping at training. I think it was Kieran that sort of divulged that.
Yeah.
And the agency that was working for Adidas said, this is what we're going to do. Come along to training. Yep, that's fine. You come in the state. Yeah, here's the names. And we're going to have a little picnic basket with some champagne. It's like, whoa. Sorry, what? You're not having champagne. Oh, but we're just going to be in like, no. This is a performance environment. You're not having champagne. There's a guy that worked for the agency. So AIG were like, okay, cool, no problem. Agency, deal with it. Agency just basically went and took champagne.
Holy shit.
And popped it, and I heard it too. I was standing on the sideline, and I was straight over and said, hey guys, not appropriate. Sorry, we're going to have to get you to put that away. And they did. But man, that's become the stuff of urban myth.
But Hansen's reaction?
Yeah, he saw it. He saw it, yeah. But what he hadn't seen is what had gone in behind it was they requested it. We said absolutely not, but they did it anyway. But then we ran up and put a stop to it right away.
Yeah.
that bit doesn't make for as good of a story.
No. my version was him going ballistic and him getting them out of the stadium. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So clear up this. So you leave New Zealand Rugby around the pandemic, away for a few years, and then you come back. What happened and how did you come back in?
So I had a kid.
That'll do it.
That'll chestnut.
Yeah.
And I am at pains to say he's not the reason I left, but if I'm being truthful, there is a big part of the reason I left. Taking that as an opportunity to spend some time at home. So pandemic and travel in a pandemic aside, I was looking at how I was working, and I got pregnant, and it was a absolute happy accident, because it happened so late, and that's a whole nother story. I'm really so celebrating athletes who decide to have children at a more sensible time. But I just treated it as a bit of a logistical challenge to overcome. So I looked at the dates. I was like, okay, pregnant, have a kid there, early 2019, 5 months maternity leave. Yep. Come back, I'll have 3 weeks in the country, and then I'll go to World Cup and spend 2 months in Japan. And I was like, oh, this is great. It works out perfectly. Locked it all in. People that know, were looking at me like, crazy. But you couldn't tell me because I was also going, you wouldn't ask a guy to, so I was adamant and I did it, but I got over there and I went, I am who is missing out here? Not him because he was too little. But I was like, I was miserable. I was so miserable. I literally felt like he'd been ripped out of my heart. And I was on the other side of the world doing this job and doing an incredibly important job and a privileged job that someone else could have been doing and probably getting more enjoyment out of it, because here's me just looking at his baby monitor every time I knew he was having a nap. Yeah. And waking up at 4:00 in the morning to FaceTime him when he's 6 months old. So, funny circumstance of events. If I hadn't have done that, I would have taken 12 months off and come back into my role at the beginning of the pandemic, and then probably wouldn't have left because I wouldn't have known what it was like to be away. So in a strange way, a turn of events, I think, going away and having that experience. I was already looking at the beginning of 2020, understanding how I could do things differently. I wasn't thinking about leaving, but I was thinking about I really do need to figure out a way to step back from a lot of the travel, push my team forward, and it was going really well, and then pandemic. And then the restructure, redundancies really. Everyone had to sacrifice. The organisation, live sport, was in crisis, so I was mandated to drop half my team. And I just looked at it and went, the work doesn't stop for us just because we're in a pandemic. If nothing else, it gets harder. And because we're trying to figure out how we are going to deliver on all these contracted rights or to try to maintain any level of value for partners to keep paying us. And we had every kind of example from a tutor who went, we don't care what you guys do or how many games you play, we're going to pay you the full amount, no questions, just, we're good guys. Down to organisations that went, well, we had 6 tickets at this game, so you can't play that game, so that's a value of, and just going through like a whole financial. And that was so taxing. And then the idea was like, do it with half your team. And I looked at it and just went, nah, if there's not an opportunity now to go, then I'm probably going to be stuck here for a very, very long time doing the same thing. And I never thought of leaving to come back, but in the back of my mind, I thought, I do want to leave well. You never want to leave anywhere with people having a sour taste in their mouth. So there was an opportunity to leave. But I thought in the back of my mind, I just wanted to leave well, which I did. And hopefully. And then it was a chance to engage in my partner's business, which was an advertising agency, creative agency, but really leaning into sport. And on the precipice of 3 Women's World Cups with the government, so talked about Grant Robinson's focus on raising value and visibility of women in sport and all these kind of other opportunities, sort of using that as a benchmark and a platform to stay connected with sport, but in a completely different way of, communication, storytelling. Never worked in agency. I've always worked around agencies. I always thought that they have great jobs because it's always varied and different and they work with great people. It's hard. It's tough. Yeah. And I felt like those 3 years I worked, like I was home, I wasn't traveling, but man, it was a lot of pressure. And it was a tough 3 years from a business perspective. And a lot of agencies went through some tough financial times and losing staff and, downsizing. And that's basically what we had to do last year. So I started to think last year, this might get a bit, this might be where I have to jump off. And end of FIFA was probably a catalyst as well. And just completely unconnected and randomly, I started talking to FIFA, and there was an opportunity at FIFA, and it was like on paper, wow, how shiny and exciting and incredible. And I ended up turning it down. And the rugby role came not long after that. But it was, and I met Sarai for the first time, and at that conference I met her a few months later at another gig, and she was brought into this sort of conversation with, there's a potential role, and would you come to Zurich? And she was selling me on Zurich, and and I just had only met her those couple of times, but absolutely loved everything about her and what she was doing and how she was doing it. But yeah, ultimately said no.
Wow.
Yeah.
High demand. And so then to get you back in, is that Razor's decision? Is he giving you the call?
No. So he didn't, but we met before it was official. And he was much more involved in the team manager. So Paul McLaughlin Moose, he was much more involved in that performance because of, I guess it was that operational, really heavy logistical team management side. Because New Zealand Rugby wanted this, sort of saw this opportunity to split this role so they could give a real focus on the off-field stuff. A lot of it to do with the connection point. And, I think we'd be living under a rock if we didn't say the last few years have been challenging for the All Blacks team and New Zealand Rugby and that relationship and connection. So this was an opportunity under a new management team to have someone that was focused on off-field and focused on connection with New Zealand Rugby. So it was predominantly a New Zealand Rugby appointment with the new commercial CEO that's come in, Craig Fenton, and then Razor kind of came in on the second conversation and we sort of left the conversation going, what happens next? I said, well, I think if
Google me.
You don't, yeah. Google me, Ray. If we think that we can work together, if we have no allergic reaction to each other's personalities, then we'll give it a crack. And to be fair, my day-to-day interaction with Razor right now is not high. He's in I've got to stand up a team and a management. I've got to understand what my performance strategy is and I'm theming so for me it's like, when do I assert myself, when do I not? Just coming back to that Steve Hansen comment, and I think in 18 months it'll be, we'll be smooth, but there's a lot of newness and there's a lot of new people. This is a new role. So I'm just, treading carefully, but just trying to make sure that I stay, ahead of the game in the space that I need to stay, so when the time is right, as I said to Razor, if this goes well, I should be invisible to you. If this doesn't go well, that's when my stuff's going to come across your desk when it shouldn't. And that's my goal, is to only have you involved in the stuff that you need to be. Everything else, we're so well planned and we're so connected and when we're running it, that you don't have to worry about it.
So how much input does he have in part of your job is the media strategy, right? Like reconnecting with media and the fans and thinking of new and innovative ways to do that. Is he involved in that?
He is I've only known two other head coaches really. I worked a couple of years with Ted, but I was junior burger. But he was a really fantastic head coach. But I think Razor's different point of difference is that he's he is a visionary and he is a storyteller and he likes to stand up and tell that story. To your point, we need to work through a strategy around how do we connect Razor to the audience, to the fans through traditional media, through our broadcast media, not only Razor but the rest of the team as well. I think we want to make sure that we are giving him the platform but protecting him a little bit, especially early on because he is so in demand. But in terms of that strategy, he'll absolutely have input. So whether it's comms strategy, whether it's marketing strategy, whether it's how we want to connect with our commercial partners and things that we're looking to try to do a bit differently, fan engagement, what's our sort of purpose, our give back, our charity. Is
that unique for a head coach to be involved in that part, in that sort of side of things?
Not as much. I think the involvement that has happened previously has almost been just to make sure that it's stays in a lane and kind of out of the way. Yeah. So I need to know because I need to know what's happening, and if I have a opposing view to a direction or a strategy, then I can voice it. Might have been the involvement that previous head coaches have had. I think Razor's he sees he's our age. He's grown up with professional sport and in that professional environment. He understands the power of content. He understands the power of the media.
So what is the biggest challenge facing rugby in New Zealand at the moment?
I love the fact that you're asking me that like like I'm an expert on the it's funny you say that. I think if I come at it with a couple of different hats, if I came at it with a relevancy hat, like how do we make sure that rugby stays relevant? How do we make sure that our kids want to, be involved in rugby, whether that's playing, whether that's supporting, whether it's going to games, that rugby stays that sport that connects and inspires New Zealanders more than any other sport. And that's so important. I think that's the part when I came to rugby from a complete outsider, the sport perspective, was the part that struck a chord. Because I didn't grow up with grassroots rugby. I didn't grow up with club rugby. I wasn't standing on sideline gumboots. Never watched my brothers play rugby. But there is something about that, and people still, that's such a strong community connection with it.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge, I think, is to make sure that rugby's relevancy stays current and really, really embedded in New Zealand society. And probably the other risk is, how do we stay competitive? Our teams in black are known and celebrated for what we do on the field. If we just become a rugby team that wins a bit, what does that look like? Versus the rugby team that despite all over the years wins.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not just All Blacks, it's Black Ferns, it's our sevens teams. It's do not get me to try to explain a rugby move or a maul or a scrum or anything like that. But I look at, even just in my time, the All Blacks make big leaps of innovation in the way they approach the game, from right back till now, and then the rest of the world catches up. But they've always had that, there's always been that leap. And I feel like this is the real opportunity for this team to make that next leap, because there is so much, strong competition in the world. Look at our schedule this year. It's brutal. England at home is still England. It doesn't matter what their record is. It's still England. And then we have to back up with 2 games in South Africa and even Fiji. Don't count out the Fijians. Yeah. What does the All Blacks do to make that next leap of innovation that might get us at 2-3%, ahead, which gives us that kind of, advantage while the rest of the world are catching up to figure out what we're doing.
Do you work with commercial partners around tapping into some of that innovation and how stuff from their industry can be transferred into a sporting context? The partner that's probably the most relevant in that space is Ineos, with their program of performance, when they partner with Mercedes and the racing team and football, etc. So they've got an innovation and performance team that they basically connect with all of the high performance coaches and strength and conditioning and what mental skills and look to share. So that is a real opportunity of advantage for performance. And I know that the last couple of years, our coaches, particularly our assistant, the All Blacks assistant coaches, have been really connected, find it really valuable. So there is always that opportunity. I think Adidas is the other one because of the innovation of product. It's what can make, just make again those little gains of better uniforms and boots, and obviously are so critical because we are still top to toe with Adidas. So everyone's wearing Adidas boots, and they might come out of Super wearing another brand, and we need to get them into Adidas really quickly. And the last thing you want to do is, have boots, stopping guys on the field. So they are connected to a point, but I think when you come down to that pure, on-field style of play, that's still really driven out of the IP that's in New Zealand. What happens when an unrippable Adidas jersey rips?
Was it ever called unrippable though? I think it was called blackest ever. Yeah.
Careful with your words.
2011 World Cup, yep. I was there.
I'm going to start sort of bringing us on the home straight. It's been such a cool journey, and it's such an exciting year that you're at the start of. Like you say, there's so much ahead of you. It's huge. It'd be overwhelming for me, but you are well positioned to take care of it. But last year, looking back, was such a big year for women's sport, and it's such big leaps and bounds, and it seems like it was everywhere, and it was gaining prominence in the media, and everyone was talking about it. The Black Ferns, the Women's World Cup, so much going on. How are we doing? Are we making strides? Is the legacy of these things continuing on?
That is $1 million question. It really is. You hope and like to think that there has been a shift of interest. Certainly the World Cup platform was for all 3 World Cups, and so just sort of kept building and building and building. And the Football Ferns were so inspirational last year, and the tournament. Sarai talked about it. So that game that they won against Norway to set the scene for a successful tournament in New Zealand was so important.
Yeah, it was huge.
So important. But my worry and my nervousness was always what happens after FIFA, what happens after the World Cup. And we've got Paris Olympic Games, and I'm watching the news and I'm watching things, and I'm just not seeing the same kind of level of urgency, I'd say, around how do we keep this momentum behind supporting our women athletes and our female athletes to the same sort of level. And of course, it's a different proposition with the World Cup, and particularly a home World Cup. But I think that there has been a perception shift and change in respect of the responsibility for an organisation like a sporting organisation, and responsibility for the media to play their part in serving up the information, serving up the content, so that it can then be supported. But I think there's a real shift in the perception of that these female athletes that are playing these sports are bloody good athletes, and really, really exciting to watch, more than just women's tennis, because that's always what you hear, used to hear. It's like, other than women's tennis, everything's rubbish. So we're not looking to compare apples with apples here, but people that say they love watching the Black Ferns now is because they love that style that they play, which is different from the All Blacks. It's not as big hitting. It's a bit more free flowing and skillful, things like that. I think there's a shift in that perception. What happens next, though, is a really good question, and I don't know what the next event's going to be. What do we get behind? That's not a 2-week Olympic Games. On the other side of the world, what can we do to keep these stories front and center? The fact that you've invited me on this amazing podcast is a great start, because it does keep the topic of women's sport relevant and in a wider audience context. So I think it's just just trying to play our bit. I have a private social status still, because I'd be terrified to open it up. Like, I couldn't deal with the shit. Yeah. I couldn't deal with it. But to my little following, I'm just constantly posting, just reposting, just milestones or results, and just trying to keep that that message going. Like the Tall Ferns just missing out on Paris. And Stella Beck playing a frickin' blinder, and Charlize and what she's going through, and how can we help her? How can we support her? Just trying to do whatever I can, but it's behind private. Paywall.
Yeah. But as you've indicated as well, like, you weren't always so passionate about it either, right?
No.
Like you found your voice, and you're leaning, your strength in the ways that you are, through advocacy, through MCing, through sharing your story as well. Like you are doing your own bit in your own way.
Yeah, I hope so. And you're right, because sorry, I'm going to cough.
Happens to all of us.
I was, and I'm so ashamed and embarrassed to say, but I was that person that through all my playing days, but also into my early professional days, of going, well, it's just a commercial reality. The women don't earn as much money. They're not bringing in the sponsorship dollars. So I was at that finite point in the spectrum of what's contributing to that, and I said that. I was like, I don't mind only getting this, that or the other thing when I played for New Zealand because I was just happy to play for New Zealand. And the boys were off doing X, Y, Z. Well, yeah, but they're filling stadiums. So we were all, we just accepted it. And it's not okay to accept it anymore. And I think it's just to start to talk about what we can do and what we can shift, that it's, okay, there's what's happening with women's sport. Okay, well, let's go back to, what's the schedule look like? World Rugby, come on, guys, get it together and figure out women's rugby and give us a schedule.
Yeah.
Give us a schedule that we can bank on, like 2 years in advance, like you can for the All Blacks, so that the rugby union can then start to build up a platform of events and communication and marketing and support behind these players, so that then we can communicate that there are games, so then the fans know that there are games, and then the broadcasters can broadcast them. So, yeah, it's like, at what point do you enter that cycle? But I'm really embarrassed that I was at the other end for a very, very long time, even in my own playing days of, it's not a commercial reality. Women's sport isn't a commercial reality. What is a commercial reality now? It's such a commercial reality, and it's good, and it's awesome to see that support is starting to grow.
You talking like that is helpful, because a lot of people would share that view, and as you get educated and you learn and you come out the other side. And much the same as sharing your story at the beginning of the difficulty. Like, it's so good and empowering when people can talk about the tough things or the ways that they thought which weren't right. So yeah, just to try to sort of land the plane, it's been an epic. Like, you've had such a life to be proud of, but there's still so much more to go. I know you're going to be retired in 10 years, but I'm so excited to see, where the journey takes you next. And thank you for coming in with us. We're really honoured to share this platform with you and for you to share your story. But
It's been a blast. It's funny because everyone I listened to on your podcast started with, I'm really nervous. I was like, why are they nervous? Because you guys you take such good care of your guests and do such thorough research in a week. It's amazing. So it's been a real privilege. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to echo, I've got some parallels with your story in terms of a father that went through a serious head injury when I was young. And that stuff's not easy to talk about ever.
Yeah.
So I do want to commend you for that, because I've not heard you speak about that in any of the research that we did. And that is amazing. And also to not only navigate that topic, but a very difficult topic around grooming and the abuse that you suffered as a young athlete. And I just hope that gives other people courage to start a conversation at least, and not to feel like they've got to hold on to some of those burdens that they might feel themselves. So you're doing amazing stuff out there.
Constantly learning, even at 48, mate.
Totally.
Yeah.
Learning and growing. Cheers, Megan.
Thank you.